High School of the Dead is a very infamous medium. It was a light novel, a manga, and a kick-ass anime to boot. You know, every time I think of a show that I want to watch where it has a perfect mixture between fan service, action, scenery, as well as guns and good character design / development, I think of that. Unfortunately, the person who created it is deceased. We're not gonna get another volume to the manga or the light novel itself. We're not even gonna see another season. It's a pity. You know, pour one out to the original, because he deserves a lot better. And honestly, I hope his son is doing well, and that his next manga or his next volume or whatever his next project is gonna sell high. However, we're not here today to talk about the sadness that is the conclusion of High School of the Dead. Today's video is the top 10 mangas and webcomics that hit just as hard as High School of the Dead did. With these titles, they may not be exactly the same, they may not have, character dynamics, or maybe all the fan service that we can get in the story, but these stories are nonetheless what I consider to be very similar to High School of the Dead due to its circumstance, its scenery, the bleakness, and character, depth, design, that sort of thing. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So as you guys should know, my honorable mentions always comes first instead of last, because I don't want to get anyone's expectations high ups or whatever. And whatever story that didn't make the honorable mentions, feel free to mention it in the comments. But with that being said, let's get into it. The first story up for the chopping block is Appetite, which happens to be a story about our character named Lee Doon, who happens to be a transfer student and our friendly neighborhood handicap, who needs to crutch to walk everywhere he goes. Now, since this character here is a new transfer student and tries to make new friends, no one wants to associate with him because he immediately gets picked off for bullying by the bullies. And to make matters worse, nobody wants to talk to him or even helps him. So he feels that his life is pointless and immediately jumps off to think of the S word. And before he could, that's where he meets the new girl, Aji. Aji, who happens to be one of those quiet kids that sits in the classroom ready to push up their pumped up kicks. This girl actually is something particular. In exchange for saving his life and making his school life better, she gets to have him over for dinner at the age of 18, if you get what I'm saying. Even though Appetite is kind of a bit abstract, it's a story that I like genuinely. It has a bit of gore and action, which is kind of like High School of the Dead. Unfortunately, there's no series that I can compare it to watch or to read. Basically, it's kind of zombie Naruto. For the next set of zombie brains, we have Senkaria, a zombie romantic drama with two protagonists instead of one. The first protagonist, we have a Zamtaku that's known as Furuya. Furuya, who lost his mom at a young age and basically lost a cat at the current timeline. He decides to bring the cat back because he couldn't deal with not having the cat in his family. So as he's going on this said mission to bring back the cat, that's when he meets Senka, who is saying some things that should not be said out loud in public, but at the same time messed up. Then begins to bond over their love of the cat. And eventually Furuya slowly begins to learn about her, and learns about her too late, as she takes the poison which is going to bring back the cat, and also turn her into said zombie after she falls off a cliff. The whole story is this zombie romance where it has its own bit of lore and story, where you learn more about the characters and their explanation for how their zombies would work, being that in the same universe, zombies do exist, but only to a select few who would know about it. Next on the menu, we have Zombie Hunter. Now you might be wondering, why in the hell is Zombie Hunter on this list? Like, it has zombie in the name of it, the art looks amazing. Why on earth have you put it here? Well, it's simple. For one, there's not much into the chapters for the story. And two, the main character is more scary than the zombies themselves. Especially since he can put the fear of God into one. And three, this motherfucker is strong enough to deflect a car. A flying car. With that aside, it is a good read. I read at least 2 chapters. I haven't gone back to finish, but I should. And I recommend it. It's about 20-something chapters worth. I'm not too sure. Just go read it for yourself. You'll know. The final hors d'oeuvre to go with this zombie platter, we have Cooler Than Dead, which is a story that sadly is a one-shot. But there's some good news. The person who created this created one of the other stories that's actually on this list that made it a lot farther. But let's get into the story. For the story, it's simple. In a world where zombies are primarily dominant and humans are literally a minority at this point, we are left to think, how could they stop this? How could they combat this? Thus, they answer with people who were originally zombies, where 5 of them were test subjects and only 2 came back as human, where they have the power of a zombie to be able to fight and take hope with them. Our first stop for the zombie can of whoop ass is our number 10, which is The Last Human. The Last Human is a story about a man by the name of Zhao Taichen, who happens to be the last human, where this man is super strong. Why? Because the infection doesn't just infect those who are not immune to it, but those who are willing to adapt. But since he was sent back to the past, the foolish warrior, wielding his magical knowledge of powers, stepped forward to oppose the zombie apocalypse, and only he can change the past and undo the law that is his current state of affairs with the zombie apocalypse. Now, with that aside, the main character is a badass and literally doesn't give a fuck if you're just bad. He will kill you the second you do something wrong again. He doesn't take time to have it happen to him again. If you're looking for a character who's badass and very strong, but not very much overpowered, this is a story I would say to check out, since the main character goes through this crazy version of a zombie apocalypse where it was caused due to a meteor. However, as the story progresses, you will encounter the characters being a bit too strong, since most of them have powers where almost you could say, yes, it's a JoJo reference. And honestly, that's kind of sad, even though the factor that these characters are pretty cool. Each one has their own unique powers as you learn to understand their abilities. Check this particular title out. There is no TV show or movie adaptation for it as of 2021 to 2022. For numero 9, we have Corpse Princess, a story about a young woman who dies and comes back to life after a brutal death to become a corpse princess, where her goal is to literally kill about 100 denizens, or should I say ghouls, that talk. Kinda like the Return of the Living Dead zombies. But other than that, it's a good read. I read about 4 chapters worth. So I would say this should be worth a read if you're looking for something that's light and easy to get into in terms of a gory / badassery type of story. The upside is this does have a anime counterpart if you're looking to partake. I mean, come on, you got a machine gun wielding high schooler. And did I forget to mention that a corpse princess is immortal? Do I need to say more? For the Zombie 8, we have Dead Days, a story that primarily centers around a 16-year-old who is trapped in his bedroom with basically nothing left to eat but the pizza that he had earlier.
And being that the story doesn't just focus on the 16-year-old, it does shift its tone and as well as perspectives from different characters. But primarily, it is about the 16-year-old. The story itself also has an explanation and lore towards how the zombie apocalypse began, and on top of that, its deep origins as to who's the cause of it. Now, I like this story. It's a good read. It's on Webtoons if you are willing to go on there and take a look. And the sad thing is there is no anime adaptations for this. The upside is there is a film very similar to this called #Alive. I honestly say it's a good watch. The only difference is the main character in the movie is 19 years old and he's a video game streamer. On top of that, he's not locked in his bedroom with a zombie on the other side. Instead, he's trapped in an apartment room with a whole bunch of zombies out there in a small complex. But you know what? Just give this a read before you see the movie. It's a good read. I promise you, you would not regret it.
And with the 7th day of zombies, we have school live. This anime, this manga is so freaking crazy. Jokes aside, the manga is particularly about a group of high school students, a particular group that's focused on. There are different personalities, different types of strategic minds and thoughts, where you think this is an everyday school life that most people say is ordinary, where nothing really special or particular happens. But, sad truth, this is only the thoughts of one person and one person alone, and that is Yuki. Yuki, who happens to be a 3rd year, and one of the protagonists we follow in the story, is living her own life of delusions. Why? Because the reality, and the sad reality, is they're in a zombie apocalypse. None of her friends did anything to snap her out of this. Why? Because if she sees the sad and horrible reality that they live in, then of course that's the sad and horrible reality they have left to live with. Where literally these kids, they look like kids. You can't tell me these are high school students. They literally look like little kids. Little 12-year-olds and 11-year-olds who are trying to survive a zombie apocalypse. This is a story that's jacked up and a little bit sad. It does have an anime counterpart, like I mentioned earlier. It's about 12 to 13 episodes long, and it's really good. I recommend to go read it. The story has concluded, and there's also a after story if you want to read more for the manga. So click on it, check it out, read it, you know.
Next up here for the slaughter, we got Sweet Home Alabama by my man. But no, here we have Sweet Home, one of the series created by Coryxkenshin. Now this person has a knack for telling good stories. But for this story, it follows a character by the name of Hyun, who you may think is a dirtbag at the beginning, but as the story progresses, you begin to like him and specific characters in the story that it also follows. Now, if you like a story where it's very emotional and deep and even has its own particular hell-defying, scary-ass looking creatures that have transformed because of the monsterization virus, look no further because this story's got it going down. Hell, I won't lie, this story even had me tearing up a couple of times. I won't judge if you cry, because yeah, this story has some moments where you might want to be sitting there with some tissues and some ice cream. This story is fairly unique. I recommend it if you're looking for something that's serious and it's got like its own depth. Now, yeah, they're not really zombies technically. They're like beings that talk and have their own conscious mind, where they fall into their desires. However, in particular, it is apocalyptic and it is dark. Each character has their own cards they get to set out and pull. But other than that, the story unfortunately doesn't have an anime, and it's sad. But there's two things that make it kind of a good news. Number one, Coryxkenshin has made 2 other series outside of this, if you're interested. You have Bastard and you have Shotgun Boy. And the other thing is, if you're really into Korean dramas, you do have Sweet Home, the series that's available on Netflix. Although it's not my baggage, it's not something I care about, but hey, re-release got something, right? So check it out. For our infectious number 5, we have The Hour of the Zombie, created by none other than Tsukasa Samura, the guy who happened to make Crueler Than Dead. Like Highschool of the Dead, Hour of the Zombie begins off with a normal school life where everything starts off normal and hunky-dory until something spirals out of madness. The protagonist for this story this time around is Akira. Our boy Akira has one simple premise and goal: to go out with Kurumi, who he wants to be his girlfriend. But Kurumi, his childhood friend, doesn't have feelings for Akira. Instead, she has feelings for Umizawa, Akira's best friend, which he doesn't understand why she sees stuff in him instead of him. But she gets to become a zombie, and so does Umizawa. Things look pretty damn bad right now, but here's a catch. For every person that gets infected, they're not just a regular zombie, because in the next 30 minutes, they'll turn into a human, and then after that 30 minutes, they're going to turn back into a zombie. It's an endless cycle that repeats itself for these people who are infected, where they are given communication and, type of race basically, and it's a turf war between the people who never turn into a zombie at all and those who do turn into zombies, which is kind of why I like Hour of the Zombie. It's a very good one, and there is one slight bad news for people who want to read this. The rest of the story is translated in Russian, and I have not yet understood what the hell happens towards the end, but it's a good story nonetheless. With 4 bullets left in the chamber, we have Zombie World. Now, Zombie World is a really good webcomic. This is literally the way how it starts. Like this right here you're seeing right now, that's how it starts. But as it's beginning to look up for this character, you think that, yeah, he's in trouble. But we go back to the past, moments before it began, where you see him as a lovely family man. A good man who was able to smile and take care of his family. And then that's when the restrictions have started, and then you will slowly begin to see the end of the world. But other than that, this dramatic shift in tone in the story for the character who starts off pretty normal and an average dad to being this badass who is very smart, and on top of that, he is determined. But I don't know if that alone is enough to survive in this world, because they're already resorting to cannibalism within a certain amount of time into the story. But you know what? It's a great read. It's ongoing as far as I know. There's not a lot that I can tell you. What I can say is there is no anime adaptation, no film adaptation, no reality TV show adaptation at all as well. But hey, go check this one out. Do yourself a favor. It's great. For the 3rd installment of this blood-soaked list, we have Magical Girl of the End, or known as Mahou Shoujo, and also known as Magical Girl Apocalypse. Now, with this story, it's about this high schooler, who has this particular aspect about him that reminds me of Kakashi from High School of the Dead, being that he kind of has love interests here and there, and doesn't really think much about school. But all that began to change when one incident happens at school. A little girl that seems to be giving this coach a hard time ends up knocking his block the fuck off. So yeah, we are sitting here watching a little girl murder people. But why is this on the list in particular? Well, here's the kicker. Every person that either dies to a little girl like that, or to any person who's a magical girl, they basically come back like a zombie. But not a zombie, but a person who will rip you limb from limb and beat the shit out of you until you die.
And the worst part about this shit is literally it's like hell. They have a fucking star circle in the sky representing hell has been unleashed upon the world. The art style is good, and it is a pretty bonkers story. I recommend this to people who love High School of The Dead as much as I do, and they read the whole thing. The story has concluded. There is no anime adaptation whatsoever, so give this one a try and you will not regret it at all. With our second test subject, we have Hive. Now, just so you guys know, this is a webtoon, obviously, but moving forward, the story of Hive is about a group of people in South Korea who are plunged into the world of giant infested bugs who basically chow down on them like a fat buffet. Now, among these characters that we follow a guy who I'm gonna just call him John because he has a very hard to pronounce name and I don't want to butcher any more names for the rest of this week. So, when it comes to John happens to be a former soldier, and this man, along with everyone in the story that he has joined his group, kick ass. Like, I can't emphasize enough on how good the story is. It has the dynamics of High School of the Dead in terms of, the action sequences. But other than that, I say it's worth your time. Go read it. The only downside is webtoons has that particular system where you have to, read once per day. And then you gotta read the next time and another day. And the stories aren't short, but you really do be zooming when you read stuff like this. And there's so much goodies in this story too that I want to say and kind of give details for, but I can't spoil it. You have to read it. Like, literally, anything I say is kind of a small spoiler, but I don't want to spoil it at all. Just go read this, alright? Just go. We finally made it to patient 0. On number 1 happens to be Infection. Now, Infection is number 1 for a good reason. This story is almost a spitting image of High School of the Dead. Now, among the similarities I can note is that you got the main character that's simply blinded by his simple normalities of life. He's thinking about his love life. He has good friends that he cares about, and he does have his own type of grudges and own type of moments where he has development. And most importantly, both characters in both stories are the main protagonists. But here in Infection, here's what makes it different. The zombies. In Infection, they don't call them zombies. They're called carriers. And on top of that, they have worms in their eyes and mouths, and they evolve into different type of infected, which is horrifying, to say the least. On top of that, this dude has a bigger harem than Kakashi ever had. On top of that, like, all the characters in this story I like, because each one of them has a cool little trait or certain things it can do. Like, there's a character named Ragone. Ragone is my favorite because she's not only like very intelligent, tough, a fucking marksman with a certain type of weapon, but she can drive a motorcycle. And on top of that, she's head over heels in love with the main protagonist. There are so many things I can sit here and talk to you about Infection for hours. Just take my word for it. This story is literally like High School of the Dead. It even has fan service, for God's sakes. What are you guys doing listening to me talking about Infection? Go read it right now! I would like to take the time to thank you guys for stopping by and just listening to all these stories that I have compiled for years now. Because I wanted to make this video a while ago, but I never got around to doing it. But finally, I have put all my energy and strength towards this one, and I'm just glad that I'm able to do it, and I'm glad that, you know, you guys can be able to hear me out on things that literally sound just like this one particular story. But for now, that'll do it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.